explosions, the vibe, the grittiness, the realism. This is Battlefield.
Alright everybody, welcome back to another deep dive on Battlefield 6. Let's talk about Battlefield 6 and the Season 1 update, starting out with the trailer. It tries to be bold, stylish and personality driven, and that to me is exactly one of the many problems this game has. It forgets what Battlefield is actually supposed to be. The trailer pushes overly quirky, character-centric marketing, underlining each operator as if it was some kind of hero shooter. It's become an optimized personality showcase, and that's counter to Battlefield's identity, which has always been about the squad, not the individual. What further exacerbates the problem is that the game is already designed to complement the individual playstyle rather than an emphasis on teamwork. The lack of team-based vehicles in the sandbox, the extremely tight close-quarters base maps where people run off in their own separate directions. Battlefield is about soldiers, chaos, teamwork, and large open environments. This was always very obvious with past Battlefield games, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, BF4, and BF1. Personality was never the focus because you were always playing as a generic soldier on the front line. Support, engineer, medic, and recon, that's all you have to do. The moment you start focusing on identity and personality is the moment you break immersion and pull the player out the whole damn experience. And this is what sold Battlefield 6 initially. You had that grounded military aesthetic, character faces were concealed, identity and personality were not the focus here, but you're now veering off into what looks like a hero shooter exactly like 2042 was, and we discovered you hid the character model faces as a last-ditch effort, possibly because you know people hate this shit. You can literally see the character's face clipping through the fucking mask. That right there tells me you tried to mask the problem rather than address the problem. Every time the trailer pauses to let an operator pose or drop a line, it rips the energy straight out of what should be a gritty, massive scale military sandbox. And it's now a carbon copy of the same misreading that plagued 2042, treating the franchise like a personality parade instead of a grounded military battlefield experience. Instead of iconic military designs you used to represent each class, you went for the awkward character-focused specialist system. You only have to listen to some of the dialogue to truly understand how out of place this stuff really is.
I am not overconfident. I'm just better than everyone else. Oh, you know, I think I pulled something back there.
You're Russians! Pull your fucking thumbs out of your asses and get the fucking battle back to them!
And to think Battlefield 6 is essentially the same thing, only here the developers decided to again cover all the operators' faces last minute to hide the problem. They're basically still using the same specialist system, and I fear they're going to retread the same mistakes all over again, turning Battlefield into a Rainbow Six Siege hybrid type experience with character cards. We've all already seen a reoccurring problem with the character skins. That weirdo, colourful, stupid style seems to be resurfacing because they couldn't help themselves. I don't know how many YouTube videos I've seen with people telling you they don't like this shit, but Season 1 seems to triple down on the problem again, so you don't seem to be listening to player feedback. In fact, you seem to be on a blocking spree, which ultimately makes you look even worse as a studio because you refuse to listen to player feedback. Again, there's an extreme focus on character identity, complete with shot-by-shot introductions. It's a bad creative design choice and shows the studio are trying to signal modern corporate values rather than deliver Battlefield's signature style. They've obviously got to check those ESG scores and diversify the game. Ignoring Battlefield had varied factions, forces and backgrounds for years, but this relentless push for diversity is essentially a vehicle for problems and ultimately ruins the visual look of the game and authenticity. I'm just going to be honest here, the diversity they're going for is based on representing women and people of color, from campaign right down to the multiplayer. It doesn't help when majority of the operators are female with a distinct lack of male presence, of any male presence in the engineer and support class in NATO, placing women in these impossible positions when they don't even make up that much in the military. So I don't know what game they're trying to build here. However, I digress because the issue is making the characters the show instead of focusing on the battlefield. Players aren't looking for iconized heroes on posters. They want to feel like one of many soldiers tossed into an enormous conflict where the spectacle, not the personality, is the point. And unfortunately, all of your base maps on release were not Battlefield-style maps. You've released recently 3 decently large maps since then, 2 of which I covered, which were just recycled from Fort Linden. The next map is Eastwood, which we're about to go into. And guys, feel free to drop a comment. You are free to vent about the game. You won't get blocked here, and it lets me know if any of this resonates, because ultimately, guys, the game has massive potential, but the game is clearly being held back by the developer's very limited capacity.
Teams have been working so hard on this for so long.
So we don't have the capacity.
They might claim they've worked their hardest, but as I've shown before, this game has given you way less in terms of content compared to what you were getting over a decade ago in games like Battlefield 4, so they're obviously not working hard enough. One of the things I've noticed with modern Battlefield is that the game constantly swings between dark war drama to Marvel style quips. 1 second it's a gritty combat, the next it's playful operator Hollywood shit. Things like running a golf cart through a firefight really turns the whole thing into a comedy, and it's just tonal whiplash. Again, 2042 suffered from this exact confusion, and the trailer here shows lessons weren't fully understood. You look at games like Squad, you understand right off the bat this is a grounded military experience. You're not gonna see stupid shit. And looking at some of the earlier Battlefield trailers, you again see that dramatic difference in tone. It's serious, grounded, cinematic, and epic. Battlefield 3 went for this visceral Black Hawk Down vibe, echoing through a digital viewport. Gameplay showcased high contrast shadows and gritty visuals, which contributed to a seriousness reminiscent of films like Saving Private Ryan. This created an immersive and intense atmosphere, reinforcing that sense of being part of a high-stakes military conflict rather than a light-hearted or comedic fiction. Now, credit where it's due, Eastwood is a breath of fresh air. Literally. After the base game's claustrophobic choke point-ridden layouts, Eastwood finally remembers one of Battlefield's core commandments. Give players massive open arenas where vehicles, infantry, and chaos can coexist. You've got wide open valleys, elevated ridges, long-range sight lines, clear compositions, smart clustering of geometry like houses, mansions, and open fields, which cater to that diverse set of playstyles. Objectives like capture points in Conquest are evenly spaced out but could be improved. This is the kind of map that encourages combined arms strategy rather than funneling everyone through narrow corridors like the base maps did. The art style is also really good. Set in a suburban villa and golf retreat in Southern California, now transformed into a chaotic frontline. Clean silhouettes and readable terrain, a natural color palette that supports visibility. You've got this really nice humid LA vibe to it, almost like you're playing GTA 5. A hot summer's atmosphere, lush green environments with palm trees, all surrounding luxurious pools, high-end homes, backyards, dusty brown and beige urban spaces, and wide open scenic routes for vehicle combat, namely around the streets and golf course. I do have a problem with the map layout itself in Conquest. The golf course area might benefit from another capture point, because at the moment there's currently no reason to go to this area, and if you do, you're just a sitting duck. There's plenty of open space here which provides space for vehicle combat, so it only makes sense to place a flag here to provide that point of contention. It also forces vehicles to use the entire map rather than just pushing through streets every time. This is all really great stuff. Again, instead of that hyper-dense, over-designed look of the launch maps, Eastwood finally feels like a place where two armies clash, not just an obstacle course trashed out with shit tons of objects, so you're constantly vaulting over shit. It does, however, feel like a remix of Golf Course from Fort Linden. This is now their second map with a golf course you released within the same time frame with the same assets, and this raises the concern of whether or not the developers are going to keep recycling maps. Like, I want you to provide something other than these huge LA Dust Bowl type maps. And here's the problem: while Eastwood is refreshing, it's not revolutionary. The design language screams generic open battlefield civilian zone, rather than anything memorable, anything inspired by the military theater. It's functional, but it doesn't carve out any unique battlefield identity like Damavad Peak, a huge military base set in a mountain with a helipad at its peak, offering verticality and an epic base jump assault. Lankang Dam, which features a dam, a megastructure which you can destroy. Rogue Transmission, which offers a giant radio telescope which you can, again, collapse. Or Caspian Border, which gives a giant radio tower centerpiece which again can be destroyed. This was remade in Battlefield 4, where they added a massive concrete security wall to it with gun towers, all of which could again be destroyed. Paracel Storm from Battlefield 4, a military-themed island offering dynamic weather events and naval combat. Eastwood feels like a corrected baseline, not some bold creative leap. And that's my concern here, is that the team are leaning into safe, circular, open maps anchored by suburban residential clusters, public infrastructure zones, office blocks, commercial districts, light industrial sprawl. Think along the lines of, here's a ring road and some houses. Here's a construction site next to a parking garage. Here's a train station surrounded by grassland. These areas are realistic, sure, but they lack that dramatic, militarized spectacle that made previous Battlefield maps unforgettable. Where are the deep bunker complexes, the secret research facilities, those underground missile facilities, those massive military installations, or those high-security industrial zones? Battlefield has historically thrived on thematic military identity, not generic open civilian terrain. Eastwood is good, but it doesn't push the identity far enough. In fact, there is no identity in Battlefield 6, and that's been the point I've been making in my videos. Yes, it's great we have open space, but the maps in this game are starting to feel like Hardline's civilian spaces. I'm basically holding out for those epic military-themed mega bunkers like we saw in Battlefield 4, or something like that launch site from 2042. And speaking of Hardline, the interesting thing about that game was the fact that civilian vehicles became a part of the sandbox, from motorbikes, muscle cars to SUVs and tankers. That was all part of the sandbox. Considering the core narrative of Battlefield 6 is clearly focused on guerrilla warfare, it would be kind of cool to see some of these vehicles in this damn game, particularly with the Battle Royale mode. I think that was a massive missed opportunity. And I think you need to add a bit more variation to the game's vehicle sandbox anyway. I'm getting a bit tired of seeing the same golf carts every time I play this damn game, and vehicle selection is already pretty small. In terms of story, Eastwood revolved around a surprise attack from Pax Armata, as part of a coordinated strike across the US West Coast, where sleeper agents embedded within the peaceful Eastwood community are suddenly activated, launching attacks that shattered the suburb's serenity. You'll see weapon caches and supply boxes in areas like the mansions, using civilian architecture as a facade to mask their operations, again leaning into that guerrilla warfare, which reinforces the California resistant theme of the update. And it kind of reminds me of a drugs cartel turning the whole place into a war zone.
They're infantry! Yet another open conflict! Oh, fuck this! Get me out of here!
Each structure on the map is destroyable. A tank can level a whole house, and about 30 minutes into a match you'll set the tone for a war-scarred terrain. And this is the kind of visual storytelling that's exactly the right approach for Battlefield. Wide open spaces, open fields. The game thrives when vehicles have more room to maneuver, infantry have multiple approach vectors, and now combat flows dynamically across large zones. Again, complementing different playstyles from snipers, pilots, engineers, and assault players. However, after playing this on Rush, the map becomes a nightmare because it falls into the exact problems as all the base maps in this damn game. Like, I can't understand why you keep falling into this same problem. It becomes a linear, narrow-spaced, COD-style map trashed with shit tons of objects where you're constantly vaulting over shit, head-glitching clusterfuck. The art starts to interfere with the gameplay. Same problems as all the other maps. You need to stop this shit. Another pressing issue is that you're remaking maps. I've already spoken about splitting Fort Linden into several maps, Golf Course and Defense Nexus, which is fine given the context, the lack of open maps, but the issue here is that you've reskinned Empire State into a snow-themed version of itself. I have to be honest here, this is fucking lazy. And it's a fast-paced map people have already gotten sick of, so it's even worse this time. I don't know when this became a thing in Battlefield. Only time I remember this happening was in Battlefield 4, where they released a nighttime version of Zavod 311, but there was a practical functional difference there, forcing players to use night vision, which made the map feel dramatically and fundamentally different. Only here the snow is only a cosmetic change. Battlefield wasn't marketed as a free-to-play game, yet here we are seeing many of those free-to-play hallmarks like reskinning maps, battle pass shit, advertisements, microtransactions, and extravagant player skins, all becoming increasingly prevalent the further we go into this damn game. This is all fundamentally at odds with Battlefield. You need to get back to premium, because at least that way you can at least try to recapture the spirit of the franchise, steering away from these modern trends, and players are guaranteed fresh, lasting content, quality content, that stands the test of time, rather than relying on recycled assets and superficial cosmetic upgrades. That being said, Battlefield is currently struggling with a few unique challenges, which I prefer to call design choices. Base maps are cluttered to the point of suffocation, and they're way too small. We're not interested in any of this high-octane shit. Geometry stacked on geometry, props everywhere, tight combat lanes creating repetitive fights and choke points that make every map feel like Operation Metro, and we're sick of this shit. Eastwood, Golf Course, and Defense Nexus are genuinely fun on Conquest. They support that open warfare perfectly and let the chaos breathe. However, as I said, they do fall into the trap of being nothing more than generic suburban maps, and I do hope the developers recreate those thematic military-focused maps with huge set pieces, with levolution and water-based vehicles in the future. The problem is, narratively, you're talking about a PMC, and private military groups will never have that kind of financial backing, scale, or military presence big enough to create this kind of infrastructure. But this is a game at the end of the day, and it's all fictional, so it's up to you how you push this game forward. The new skins are fine, functional, some cool ideas, some silly flair, but again, the problem is the marketing emphasis on personality-driven operators rather than the battlefield itself. Cosmetics should complement the sandbox, not redefine the game's identity. When the skins become the show, the war disappears behind them. In terms of the good, Eastwood is genuinely a decent map. Great scale, great flow, great design clarity, strong art direction, and visual environmental storytelling. Gameplay benefits massively from open spaces. In terms of the bad, the trailer leans into this hero shooter trope, overemphasizing on operator personalities, tonal inconsistency, echoes mistakes from 2042 by misreading what fans want. The character-focused marketing overshadows the battlefield itself. And then there's the obvious issue, which is the map isn't designed to rush properly. In terms of flow, this map is just way too narrow, and it falls into the exact same problems as the base maps. Cover everywhere, props on top of props, narrow sightlines, and it just turns into a clusterfuck in terms of rush. But on Conquest, there's finally space to breathe. So they definitely need to readjust the map. If the studio doubles down on large-scale maps and pulls back on personality-centered branding, Battlefield 6 could finally realign with what made the series legendary. Mass-scale immersion, faceless squad warfare, chaos, and combined arms sandbox freedom. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. That's DW signing out.